what are some of your highlights that are your personal favorites?
There's a play I wrote called A Future Perfect, which actually has a song, an occurrence song in it as part of the play, and it's about two couples who have been friends since college and what happens to their relationships, two straight couples, what happens when one of the couples announces they're having a baby. And it had a production back in 2005 and 2015, and it's like a play that it's definitely like my play about my college friends. And so in an interesting way, I feel like that play is really personal. And I just started a new play that's going to have a workshop out in Minneapolis called The Remains, which is about a gay couple from Boston that are getting a divorce and what happens when they announce that divorce to their family, respective families. And so I feel like having someone just gone through that experience, both of those plays feel really personal to me, and in a way that like all the music I make with Kat, I feel like comes from a really personal place. And so I feel like those two plays feel like to me like they capture all the power of what I'm trying to do in music on stage. So I guess I'm proud of those. It's hard. Yeah. I think the thing that makes
and is
that
true? Is that true for you? Is that old writer rule true for you about bringing kind of what you know or what you see to the experience, what you're feeling, or maybe something that you wanted to tell for a long time? Like, do you see aspects of your personal life, something that might almost be a little bit naked in some of your story writing?
Yes. That's the short answer. But I guess the thing I think about when I'm making music or when I'm writing a play or thinking about a film is that I want it to be incredibly personal, something that comes from my life, but at the same time feel universal enough that someone who's not me can have access into that experience. And so like some of my plays, like I wrote a play about the Rwandan genocide that was produced in London last year, and that play is very far removed from my personal experience, but at the same time, if you know me, you know that there's so much of like my struggles with, I was raised Catholic and what that meant when I left the Catholic Church, and like feeling helpless in the world when like terrible global disasters are happening. So I think that's the trick about writing, and I think it's also the trick about writing good lyrics and making good music, is that it's really personal, but it also has to transcend the personal and tap into things that everybody is feeling.
This one looks interesting. Inappropriate sexual relations. A young actress falls for an older actor old enough to be her father. A young man brings home a boyfriend old enough to be his stepfather. A teenage boy and girl consummate their high school love, only to discover that both of them like boys. A novel for the stage full of unspeakably dirty things. And it says production history currently in development. Now, is that current or is it in development?
Yeah, it's in development. We're doing a workshop of that play here in New York in I think it's December. It's a play. It's like I wanted to write basically what would like be sort of almost a porn novel, like a fancy porn novel, and do it on this stage where you could actually try to figure out. So my director and I have to figure out in December how you stage a play, which is really a novel that's full of things that you can't stage and what that looks like. And so that's sort of the challenge I set myself for that play. Yeah, that's another play that I would be lying if I said didn't come from a very personal place. Not that any of those stories are my story, but...
Well, one thing that I think that is important is, since we're talking about the sort of stigma about open relationships as it relates to the LGBTQI community, which I'm not even sure it just limits to our community. That might be stigma in the straight world as well. But isn't it important if you look at television and where television is making these crazy milestones with the LGBT characters on like How to Get Away with Murder and Game of Thrones and all these different barriers that are being broken, don't you think it's important? Like, it looks like you're trying to tell different facets of our stories in your plays as well. So you're bringing some of your experience, but you're showing different characters and different types of experiences. Is there some subsets of our community that you still have to get down on paper? Because you have the boy girl, you've had the couples, the crossover. What's next? What's the next twist?
What's the next? I mean, I guess part of that just comes from, I think, growing up in the 90s, being in college in the 90s, and being gay or being interested in different kinds of relationships and issues. You just would look at TV and you'd be like, well, that's not my experience, and nothing seemed to kind of capture that. So it seems like a pretty exciting time to be a writer, in theater and film and television is just being like, yeah, we can tell all different kinds of stories that we haven't seen before. And it's exciting because there used to be this fear that like, if people don't look like us, we're not interested in their stories. And I hear that all the time with the Rwanda play because it's an all black cast. And so I'd show up as a white gay dude and they'd be like, oh, you wrote this play? And I'd be like, yeah. And so I feel like that's part of the challenge I always set to myself. It's like, yeah, like what can I write about that's both really personal but also like something I haven't seen before. And so I guess inappropriate sexual relations is a good example of me trying to do that.
Yes. Now, just taking you back to the 90s for a moment, 90s television, where there really wasn't a representation of us on TV. And one thing that I will never forget, maybe you saw this episode, but LA Law was a big thing on television. And this man and woman are at dinner, and she says, Peter, I need to tell you, I have sex with both men and women. And the music swelled to this huge crescendo. And as soon as she said, as women, even I was sitting there like, what? So those were the types of barriers being broken, to slowly integrate the possibility that someone might be bisexual. They didn't make her gay. They made her bisexual. And so wouldn't it be interesting if we could climb into the DeLorean, go back to like 1992 era and go to the television station and drop in some episodes of Queer as Folk or Game of Thrones or something into those TV audiences? I guarantee their faces would be pressed back. But I guess where I'm going with that is, do you feel like people needed to be kind of slowly, modernized in terms of acceptance of our culture and our community and kind of normalizing us? Like they had to start small like that and then kind of working up to the whole how to get away with murder, QAF generation? Do you think it took baby steps? Is that fair to say?
I definitely think TV executives and the people in charge of big theater institutions and so forth thought that we needed baby steps. I'm not so sure that the audience members did. I mean, I think that's the thing is I as someone who makes music and someone who makes theater, I'm always thinking about audience response and how an audience will get into a story that I'm trying to tell. And I think what I've been constantly amazed by is that audiences will really go with you. If you tell a story that's authentic and honest, as crazy as it is, people will be like, yeah, I'm interested in that story. And I think that's sort of cool stuff that's on television right now. Like it is really hard to imagine a show in the 80s or even the 90s like The Americans that asks you to sympathize with Russian spies who are like killing Americans and trying to like bomb us.
Well, we have about a minute left, Ken. This is where we love to do Plug-O-Rama. Will you please tell the listeners some places that they can check out your work and also where can they find Occurrence?
Well, the Occurrence record, as you mentioned, comes out on Friday, October 7th, and it'll be available on Bandcamp and on our website and the iTunes Store digital. And we also have a beautiful vinyl edition of the record that just came to my apartment, so I got to take a look at it. So it's worth checking out. It has different versions of the song than the digital release does, so it's kind of fun to have both. And I will be in Minneapolis in October working at the Playwright Center on my new play, The Remains. And then, next February I open a play here in New York called Nibbler, which is about the 1990s. So that's what I'm doing.
All right. Awesome. So Ken Urban, playwright, band member from Occurrence. Thank you for coming on Gay News Radio. We hope to cross paths with you again, sir.
Thank you so much. This is really fun.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You've been listening to Gay News Radio on the GNR Radio Network. Download our mobile app for iPhone and Android today. And have a good gay.